Welcome to Braindrop by VCOM Solutions. Each episode, we talk to IT leaders and experts, explore recent projects, and learn from their triumphs and challenges. We hope today's episode provides you with a unique window into the world of IT, where creativity meets problem solving and technology drives businesses forward. I'm your host, Jethro Castillo. Now let's drop into today's conversation. Today on Braindrop by VCOM Solutions, I am joined by Adam Scheinberg, the Vice President of Information Technology at Massey Services, a residential and commercial pest control and prevention, termite protection, and landscape service provider. Adam Scheinberg has spent over 20 years at Massey Services, starting first as a systems manager. With years of experience, Adam has proven himself as a true leader when it comes to technology strategy, complex solutions implementations, and long-term vision. He also sits on the board of several arts, technology, and civic nonprofits. Adam, glad to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Well, let's just jump right in. So how did you get started in IT?
The story is unfortunately not as sexy as I'd really like it to be. I was post-college. I was destined for law school and changed my mind at sort of the last moment. So shortly after school, I got a call from a fraternity brother of mine who asked me if I wanted to work on the help desk for the Naval Sea Systems Command in Northern Virginia. And I said, sure, I'll take an interview. And as it turned out, I sort of had a knack for it. I got really excited. I did some boot camp studies. I sort of had interest there already. And it was like knocking the proverbial snowball from the top of the mountain. It just kept getting larger on the way down. So yeah, recognized my full nerd colors.
In college, right? A little later than most people, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, it was actually the year after I got out of college was really the first experience I had. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So what is your favorite part about working in IT for IT?
There are a lot of things that I really like specifically about this industry, but I'm sure we'll dig in a little as to why I've been 20 years at one company, but sort of aligned with that. The IT landscape is more rapidly changing than any other industry that I can think of. When I think about certain organizations, they might be using, making this up, GAP principles for accounting that are years old, right? And that's experience that you gain over time that continues to be applicable. The things that you learn about, for example, AI today are outdated a month from now. So it's continuous change. There are different kinds of challenges from month to month, season to season, year over year. And it really keeps you on your toes and keeps you sharp. It also means that you're always working with people who are voracious learners, who are aware that their career is based on them staying on top of all of these things happening around them.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to look at it. For those who love learning, there's almost no better place than technology, which is literally, like you said, a month from now, we'll have to learn something new from what we're learning today. With that being said, how do you personally kind of keep up with all of that? Where do you go to learn, grow, and keep up to date?
So I am a believer that if you want to be successful in IT, you have to be hungry and you have to want to read a lot. I often say that when I'm looking for the ideal candidate, if it's not too obnoxious to say, I'm looking for somebody who has something that I see in myself, but I see in all of my team, which is it's not that you want to know more about certain subjects. It's that you have to. It's that when I'm looking at my phone or when I'm reading something on the computer, it's not because I'm investing in my career. That's a side benefit. It's because I have to know. I have to know what's happening with the new iPhone before the facts are even out to the news. I have to know what's happening in cybersecurity. I have to know what's happening with the latest trends. And so I tend to use resources that are usually filled with people who are similar, that we're talking about late breaking all the time. Recently, I would have said Reddit and Twitter, I don't use either of those sites anymore. So now I would say Mastodon, Lemmy. I would say
Ah.
things like The Verge and Slashdot and Engadget, and YouTube is now one of those sources. If you know the right places to look, you really have to be on top of where news breaks and how to find it amongst the thousands of other bits of information that are going to be in front of you at any given moment.
Well, I'm personally curious now. Why did you decide to move away from Reddit and Twitter?
I mean, it's almost like a religious level battle at this point. Twitter, as a family that owns a Tesla as well, I'm just I'm over Elon, and I don't have room in my life for a troll like that. So I just decided I'm deleting all my content from Twitter, and I'm finished with that site. The news that's relevant will break in other places almost as fast. Reddit, I am a 17-year Reddit user. Um, and I literally have emails from when it first started, and I was writing a similar website, and I was exchanging emails with the people who created the site. But I don't like the way that they've changed how they treat their
Ah,
long-term users and their moderators. And I just sort of decided that I'm voting with my hypothetical dollars, and I use an open source replacement for Reddit that's called Lemmy, which is a Fediverse product, and I use Mastodon, which is not really a Twitter replacement, but for the sake of argument, it's a Twitter style microblogging platform, and they're both suitable. They both meet my needs. So
what's the replacement for Reddit? How do you spell Lemmy?
Lemmy. That is a Fediverse replacement for Reddit, where people submit articles and small bits of text, and then users get to sort of upvote it in the same fashion. So, interesting news very quickly rises to the top of the feed, and it's a great way to get breaking information.
Awesome. Well, keeping up with everything, what are your thoughts on the current state of IT as it is now?
Well, I think I would say it's probably more exciting than ever. And I sort of touched on this a moment ago when I said, information 30 days old might be irrelevant. And I really do think that's true. I hate to even talk about AI because it's such a buzzword right now and people talk about it all the time. But I really struggle to think of anything in my entire career that's been as rapidly changing as the way that we approach AI or machine learning. The technology is so dramatically different from just a couple of months ago. And if your experience with ChatGPT, for example, is from February of this year, then by the beginning of summer, it was a different animal altogether. So I feel like right now is a really interesting time to get involved. Cybersecurity is super hot. AI is super hot. And these are things that not only are they hot now, we know, dead to rights know that those are going to be even more important in 6 months and a year from now. So somebody deciding to make a career there hasn't missed the train. If anything, they're just like seeing that trains are a thing, and it's only going to get bigger.
uh, Everything will change so rapidly. How, I don't know if you could even give this sort of prediction or foresight into the future, but how do you think things will be shifting in the near future?
Well, let's talk about ML because that's something I just brought up. ML, of course, being machine learning.
Yep.
Um, for years, when it came to cybersecurity, we relied on a number of tactics. We looked at behaviors that would be notable, that software might say, "Hey, let me stop this process because it's doing something that looks unfamiliar that I think is probably malware." We looked at things like, let me take an individual file that I know to be a bad file, and let me take a cryptographic signature of that file, and then I can scan all of the computers on the network. And if any file matches that cryptographic signature, I know that's what it is. Those are not fast enough anymore. Ransomware can get into your network, and it can be done with your network in a half hour, and you may never have the opportunity. So what we are seeing today, but what we're really going to see mature over the next couple of months, is software that can use that machine learning to quickly see patterns and in real time not use any known signatures, not use any kind of recorded behaviors, but rather see things that are happening and say, what I'm witnessing across this network or even on just this one computer is atypical. And I really don't think I should permit this to happen. Or maybe I just need to slow it down and see if it's a momentary oddity. And so we're going to see that the way we respond to cyber threats is going to change. We're going to see the way we analyze data change dramatically. In fact, I think the way we use reports to manage a business is like going to be turned on its head. Today, you might say, let me see how much cash I have, or let me see which customers are canceling. But I think we are very close to the time that the system just says, don't even worry about a report. Here's what you need to look at today. These are customers. They haven't even canceled yet, but I'm relatively confident they're going to. Here's a customer that you think is happy, but we've used the factors 20 dimensions deep to determine you need to spend time with this customer because that cancellation is coming. This customer you think is unhappy, but we've analyzed it, and this customer is canceling you no matter what. So don't even waste your time on that. It's a lost cause. And I just wonder if we're about to have a world where the computer tells us, here's how to best spend your time. And that is going to turn business on its head. It's going to be amazing. And it's going to really change the metrics of how we measure success.
Is there any fear of like, how do we know that it's fully, we should always come in with a sense of cynicism, but how do we not overdo cynicism or underdo cynicism? How do we find that right balance? Because let's say, to take your example, they go, the computer goes, you don't need to worry about them. They're going to cancel no matter what. What if that's wrong? But maybe maybe your answer, or maybe my answer would be, but is it, even if it isn't completely right, is it still worth your time to try to win back that customer anyways? So it might be around that sort of, it might be a kind of a range, if you will.
Well, I'll tell you what my answer is. My answer is, I don't know. And I don't know that anybody knows. I think healthy cynicism is really important, because what you need to understand about every large language model or LLM that backs all of these things is that nobody really knows exactly how they work. That's sort of how they're built. Even the creators are sort of loosing it upon itself to analyze all this information. And so we have this concept now of AI hallucinations, right? And it's where it takes large amounts of data and it sort of says things that are convincing, that may or may not be true. And we're going to have to suss that problem out. And I don't have a high degree of faith that that's a short-term problem. I think that is something we're going to have to battle for a while. A better question to pose, I think, that you sort of were hinting at is, does it matter if it's right or righter than people anyway? Like if it gets it wrong 5 times, but we're canceling 50 people, does it really matter if I'm better off? I think my company would say, you bet it matters, because we don't want one customer to slip through the cracks. But as the company gets larger and larger, right, and you're talking about millions, or in the case of certain websites, billions, maybe, I don't know, maybe you're just willing to take a percentage of being wrong because it's better overall. So we'll see, time will tell.
That is a very interesting trade-off between sheer efficiency and productivity and the humanity and the personability and the intentionality. And I think that's just a human thing to always balance, right? With technology, I think we're facing that more than ever. Well, you touched on your team, your company a little bit, but we haven't really talked about it. So tell us a little bit about your IT team and environment.
So my team is about 30 people. We cover all of our locations from the mid-Atlantic to most of the way west out to about Texas and Oklahoma, and through the Southeast. We are, I want to say 7 teams right now. So we have a help desk team, a mobility team, programming, business intelligence, CRM support, a sysadmin team, a network infrastructure team, and technical writing. So we sort of cover the gamut here of all the little areas and try to have as much expertise and redundancy as we can there. We've got about 200 locations, so we have a sizable network. And one of the things that I'm really proud of is the low amount of turnover we've had in the last couple of years. My company has made some pretty aggressive moves to make the IT team really value its own culture. And that has been fantastic. And that has made us significantly stronger.
Well, I think I want to dive into culture. The first thing, though, is you have been a huge part of the culture because you've literally been there for the last 20 years. You want to talk a little bit about that? And it's a very unique situation to be at a place for that long.
Well, I mean, if you told me that I would be there 20 years when I was a 26-year-old who got the job, um, I would have laughed because I didn't even know such a thing was possible. But at the risk of kind of sounding like a corporate shill, my company does right by its team. Um, and we do things that make me feel proud of who we are. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Our core business is pest prevention, and nobody wants cockroaches in their kitchen. We have a lawn tree and shrub care business. I live in Florida. Throughout the South, it's not just that people want a green lawn because it looks nice. It's important because we don't have unlimited drinkable, clean water in the ground. So healthy turf is important. And if you've seen the news in Florida, we've got these nitrogen overflows and algae and all kinds of stuff. That is helped by responsible irrigation and by responsible water usage and good turf usage. Those are things that my company does. That's good for the environment. It produces oxygen, et cetera. Most people don't own anything more expensive than their home. And there are really termites in the ground. And it's not expensive to insure your home against termites. And we do a great job. Many companies do, but we do a great job at preventing termites from eating your home. So you look at those things and you say, I'm happy with what we do. Nobody really grows up and says, I want to be the bug guy, but it is a necessary service and I feel good about it. And alongside that, you mentioned that I sit on nonprofit boards. I'm pretty active in the community. I helped start the Orlando Tech Council, which is now called the Orlando Tech Community. I'm on the board and was the last chair of a theater for young audiences called the Orlando Family Stage. And I've been on the board and just recently stepped down as president from an organization called the Mockingbird Foundation that supports music education for children.
Oh, wow.
My company doesn't just know about this, they encourage it. Oftentimes it's expected that I'm playing a role in leading in our community, and we're generous in our support of those things. So I feel like I'm doing good things and it's helping me grow in my career, but it's also really something that makes me proud when I tell people who live in the areas we serve that I work for Massey Services. That means something. They know what that means and they feel good about it too. So years go by and you look at the investment we make in the team and the investment that they've made in me. Why would I want to go somewhere else?
Sure, absolutely. And is it that investment that has led to the low turnover rate, especially in the IT team in general, or is there more that goes into the IT culture that make people want to stay and love being there?
I'm sure it's part of it, but I would say there's a lot more to it than that. I'm very, maybe I'll say I aggressively curate the culture in our team. So I believe that it's important that you are friends with your coworkers. When I say friends, we got to understand the degrees of friends here. You don't need to hang out with each other. That's fine. But you're going to spend more waking hours with your coworkers than you are probably with your family. And if you don't like them, that's a problem. So for me, I want our team to respect each other, to trust each other, and to enjoy hanging out with one another. And I feel like it's important for us to get work done. It's also important for us to BS, to have snacks in the office, to like similar things, to have an off topic channel in our Microsoft Teams or Slack so that people are chatting with each other. And when they see something funny, they're sharing it with their coworkers and building those relationships. A couple times a year, we'll go to, either Top Golf or a bowling alley or something like that so that the team gets to hang out with each other. And I really, truly believe when you invest in those kinds of things, people want each other to be successful. And they start to see things like, my raise is not taking money out of your pocket. My acknowledgement is not taking acknowledgement away from you. We can win as a team. and then they don't want to do poor work because they don't want to let
Right.
their coworkers down because they're also their friends. So um, yeah, that's been something that I've worked on for a long time, and now I feel like I see that. And you're going to lose people eventually, but you want to lose the fewest you can. And sometimes you graduate people and you shake their hand and say, "I'm glad you found a great opportunity when I can't provide that for you."
I think that's a really admirable, and I think uh, for the number of great leaders that I've talked to, it's remarkable how many of you guys say it's the people first. And even in even in IT, where a lot of my questions are around, and we haven't even touched upon it yet. A lot of my questions are, oh, let's talk about IT, a project. Let's go into it and figure out how it solves certain problems. It always starts with, well, I got to make sure my people are good and that they like working, because that's what truly makes the business accomplishing the business objectives as effective as possible. And I just love that focus.
You kind of nailed it. If the team isn't aligned and the team isn't healthy, the projects are going to eventually lag, float, or fail. And uh, when they are happy and when they understand what they're supposed to do and they understand their roles, they want to pull their weight, and that's going to make for a more successful project.
Well, that being said, let's talk about a recent IT project. I have questions, but maybe you can just kind of freely talk about it if you want.
Sure. You told me ahead of time that you wanted me to talk about a project, and initially I really wanted to talk about how we were very early to adopt a technology called SD-WAN and sort of replaced our entire wide area network, which is kind of a nerdy subject, but I think there's a better conversation to have. Um, Recently, we had a subsidiary that was a media buyer and really involved in PR, advertising, marketing. Um, and we decided to shut them down and reintegrate them into our business. And it was really interesting because even though it was overall a smaller project, it brought up a bunch of challenges that we never really had to face before. Um, so, for example, we are a Windows shop and the subsidiary all used Mac computers. And they came in and they said, well, we don't really know Windows and we already have these Macs. How do we use them in your network? And we have to do it sort of immediately. Um, they had a setup for their conference rooms that was fully integrated that we don't use in our company. They were a bring your own device for certain types of stuff that we are not. They had clients that were different than, say, the kinds of clients we have at Massey Services, who are, more like customers of a specific service, rather than long-term relationships that are us providing some sort of managed service. And then, of course, their culture was incredibly different to ours. So trying to integrate all of those things really was like pulling a lot of strings at the same time. I had to have the sysadmins figure out, how are we managing Mac computers? How are we securing bring your own devices? How are we connecting them to our resources? How are we managing client resources that we've never had to before? We don't have websites for people who have, pest prevention service. Um, Doing that really meant that all of the teams had to collaborate
Huh.
and all of them had to work together toward a solution and get the buy-in of our marketing team, our accounting team, our risk management teams, et cetera. So it was interesting because what looked to be a small project ended up being a web of collaboration between multiple departments, multiple teams, and a lot of different effort. Um, I'm happy that we were able to sort of navigate that successfully, but trust me when I say there were a few moments that we were tripped up on how are we going to do that?
Well, how did you do it? I mean, there's so many different things, so you don't have to cover all of it, but how did you start to go about this process?
So a bunch of meetings. It turns out communication really was the cornerstone of all of this. Every time somebody had a thought about what to do, it really required a broadcast to multiple people to validate this approach is going to work. And before any execution, we really needed to have alignment of all the interested parties. Um, it also meant things that appeared to be low priority oftentimes had to be moved to the front of the line because they're blockers for other things down the line. So it turns out that how do we handle a handful of Macs on a Windows network became a really significant issue because they needed to have access. They needed to have Wi-Fi. How do they get to the global drive? They use Dropbox, but it's not our Dropbox. How do we get that file moving back and forth? How do we get them to print to our printers, which are secured a different way? So many of the day-to-day things really were dependent upon solving simpler problems that actually had slightly complex solutions. A lot of planning, a lot of meetings, a lot of communication, a lot of instant messaging.
Yeah, and how did, you have to get buy-in from so many people. How did you ensure that progress didn't come to like a standstill? It's that balance of course, you had to move very intentionally, but how did you go, you realized you couldn't move that quickly or else you might have left some people behind, but how did you also not move slowly where nothing was happening?
I would tell you that I think it was really a combination of both. Um, the technical tasks that we had to do did not take a long time. Getting to the technical tasks sometimes did. And so I do feel like in retrospect, you see all of the delays that were introduced in good faith. But, we need to talk to them and they need to sign off on the money that we need to spend and they need to get this and this needs to be changed over here. And all of that is a precursor to ever doing the first task that the sysadmin team needs to do in order to make something work. So I do think there was some uh, some drag, but not intentional
Sure.
learning experience, I would say.
Is there anything that you did, if this ever comes up again, that you would do differently?
I do think there is room to build a more formal project around things that might have seemed like they shouldn't require an overarching plan. So I am a project management professional, PMP certified, and I always sort of hunger for there to be formal project management around some of these things. But a lot of the approach to projects, whether it be something like a project plan that has all of the components, or whether it just be something like Agile, can sometimes feel like a lot of ceremony and more ceremony than is necessary for what seems like a small amount of actual labor. Um, and then sometimes you sort of test that out and find out that there's more work to be done than you thought. And maybe some of that ceremony has a purpose and you learn your lesson and you say, next time we really should go through the process.
That's funny. You said you were PMP certified. How did that come about and why did you decide to become certified and how has that helped your career?
About 10 years ago, I decided that I wanted to be PMP certified because my team often had 3-4 dozen projects running in tandem. And I feel like there was a lot of moments where we didn't really know how to unstick the project, that it would just sort of reach a point where it was a stalemate. Nobody really knew what the next move was. And so I hungered for this idea of how do we approach this more formally and bring some structure. So I decided I would do a PMP certification. I'd like to believe I'm a smart guy. I'll open a book, I'll get a certification. It turns out it was not like that at all. I ended up spending weeks like posting up in the library or a Panera or something like that and just studying the book because it's a fairly complex certification. When I got it, I walked out and I said, never in my life will I take that again. So I will never let it lapse. And that is what I do. I keep those PDUs cranking.
I love that so much. You mentioned a lot of, back to the project, you mentioned a lot of, the challenges that you had to overcome, but of course there were positive outcomes that have come from this sort of the completion. And so what were some of those?
I think there's more appetite than ever for my company to actually set up a formal PMO and engage in more official project management. We do, of course, create project charters and have project managers, but they tend to be large projects that are clearly going to take investments of hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars and involve all departments. I think there's a recognition now of the value of those things at a much smaller level. I think there's clear success at the end of certain types of collaboration. and documentation that doesn't always happen. Um, I want to say that some of the things that I might be saying are obvious to people who have been down that path before, but sometimes telling people isn't enough. They have to sort of live through it, see it work, see it not work, and then say, there must be a better way. What if we did more of the way that has worked? I suspect we're going to end up with some more formal project management throughout our company. And that's going to be good news for everybody, especially IT, where we invest big dollars in big projects that often touch other departments and play lead in other departments' projects. So lots of
Yeah.
opportunity there.
Yeah. And it's funny because you said sometimes you kind of just have to go through and experience what doesn't work in order for you to actually realize, okay, what does work is actually important. That being said, I'm still going to ask you to say things
Yeah.
to kind of recommend to other people. So what are some tools and strategies that you used here or didn't use here that you would have realized would have been good to use that you strongly recommend people use when working on their projects?
I'll give you a few bits that I sometimes use in the course of my leadership. The first is a phrase that I've used many, many times, which is you can't solve a management problem with a technology solution. Um, there's no project that exists anymore that doesn't have a technology component in the business world. And people tend to want technology to solve all problems. But the reality is, when your problem is a people problem, technology will never solve that. And so, in that same way, when people talk about AI and I talk about AI replacing jobs,
Right.
I'm like, there's a component of being, a person that just never goes away. So acknowledging that upfront with projects, where are those things that are people problems that require management from people, leadership from people to be changed? Um, and let's take them off of the board as far as technology goes. Another one that I definitely think needs some explanation is I like to say you can always count on laziness and selfishness. Now, those things sound bad, but let me just explain what I really mean. Laziness to me is if I give you an option of more work to get to result A or less work to get to result A, most people are going to choose the one that takes less work. Selfishness. If I give you two options and one of them, let's say, makes you more money than the other, or one of them gets you more candy than the other, or whatever, one of them gets you more time off than the other, you're always going to opt for the one that's best for you. I like to think of it in terms of if you can align the way that things work with the least amount of effort that's required and the best result for people, they're more likely to buy in. And so let's just acknowledge that up front and let's talk about that as a component, because buy-in from people is going to be the critical part of any project success. So those are two little tidbits that I like to share with people. And I feel like if you could just sort of address them up front, then you're less likely to run into challenges along the way.
No, I like that. Obviously, you saw my face when you said the second one. I was like, what? And then
Yeah.
you explained, I was like, well, I'm bought in. I understand. That makes sense. Well,
Yeah.
we're almost at time. What's next for you and team? You're like, oh, we could finally do more formalized projects. What will those kind of look like looking forward?
I would like to see, selfishly, I would like to see IT continue to grow as a core part of the way that my company and all companies continue to do business. IT is not a panacea. We can't solve all problems, but it is typically, um, not exclusively, but it is typically a domain for smart people who are attracted to solving problems, who are looking for creative solutions and willing to test new tools. And I think there is often a misperception that IT is very expensive, which it is, but also that ROI is not significant. Because I think the changes that we make tend to balloon the IT team and freeze or shrink the rest of the team. Meaning, if we can create tooling that means we don't need to add another accountant every whatever, $5 million. We can add a new accountant every 10 million or 50 million or whatever that number is. We can reverse the pattern of how fast the HR of our company needs to grow, the amount of team members, by investing in tools to make each person more productive. And if I can make people more productive, they can make more money. And if they can make more money, our company has more money to invest in our team, in our culture, in making sure that we're not turning over our team. It really does become a cycle. And when that's the case, how could you not be here 20 years or 30 or 40?
I love that. I love that a lot. Are there any final thoughts that you want to share that you didn't get to during the course of this conversation?
I think we hit on a bunch of the things that I really like to talk about. Ultimately, to me, the biggest thing that can make my team successful is defense of that culture, to continue to create a place where smart, motivated people want to come spend their time and help us really make a difference. That's why I think it's so important for us to invest in our team. And that comes from authenticity. And that's really the guideline that I use when it comes to dealing with a group of 2.5 people. Is when you're authentic, people can sense it. And that's the core of building a good culture. And that's the same advice I would give to any other person who's a tech leader, is look for authentic people and be your authentic self.
I will say your leadership expertise definitely shows, because the way you explain things and the way you talk about things are very clear and concise. And it was such a joy to have this conversation with you. I'm a little envious of all the people who get to interact with you on a daily basis, because this sounds a little inauthentic now, especially since we're on a podcast, but your authenticity really shows. And I think that's really incredible for the people you work with. And I also believe then that means you also surround yourself with equally authentic people. And so I can only imagine that the environment that you've helped create and are also a part of is truly a wonderful one. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for you and your time. This was a wonderful conversation. And I'm very grateful for your wisdom and your expertise.
Thank you for those wonderful compliments. I appreciate that. And you're welcome.
Well, thank you so much, and take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
VCOM Solutions is here to help make your IT projects and day-to-day operations as easy and efficient as possible. If you'd like to see how VCOM can help your organization save time and money, request a demo at vcomsolutions.com/demo. Do you work in IT? Be a guest on Braindrop. Go to vcomsolutions.com/Braindrop guest to sign up. Thanks again for dropping in. Don't forget to subscribe, and you can find us on social media at VCOM Solutions. Until next time.